Hello guys, and welcome to a brand new video on the channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be doing a live reaction to the 26-man England World Cup squad for the upcoming World Cup in Qatar. Now, this is a big announcement, and it always is for every single country, of who's going to be making the team and who isn't. But I especially feel this year and this tournament, this feels like a really pivotal moment for England. They've been very close the last few tournaments, including the Euros, to actually winning the whole thing. And it really feels like the pressure is on them to perform. And there's been a lot of players that previously had performed well for England that have been in a lot of doubt whether or not they're going to make the squad. And there's been a lot of players who have been in good form or have had good seasons that have been snubbed in the past that now look like they could be on the plane. However, today we're going to be reacting to just that. We're going to be seeing who is in England's squad. Now, full disclosure, I haven't seen the squad. I've got it in front of me right now. I've done a great job of not actually looking at it. I managed to find it on England's Twitter page because they uploaded it bang on 2 p.m. But it is worth saying that there have been some leaks. Some newspaper outlets did say this morning that a few certain names that I won't name yet have been omitted, and that a few players have actually been included as a bit of a surprise at the time. So look, we're going to react to it today. If you enjoy this kind of video, live, unedited, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. But without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the way in which I'm going to do this is that, again, I'm doing my best not to look at the screen. We're going to go by position. So we're going to start with the goalkeepers because it should be pretty self-explanatory. I mean, if it's not Pickford, Ramsdale and Pope, I'm going to be surprised. So if we'll just start off with that, probably get out of the way quickly. We'll see Pickford, Pope, Ramsdale, and probably in that order. Now, the only discussion you might want to have around this is who actually would be the starter. Now, Pickford has been the number one choice for England for quite some time, and understandably because he's performed at a good level. However, I think there's definitely been instances, even within the past couple tournaments, where he hasn't actually been the best England keeper going into the tournament. I think Nick Pope definitely should have had more chances to really cement that role. However, because Pickford hasn't made the glaring errors in the past that he's made at Everton for England, he's been able to maintain that position. And now we see this a lot, specifically with England, I would say, and since Southgate has been in charge, is the loyalty to certain members of the squad, even if they're not playing or playing well at club level. Now, I personally feel, as a non-Englishman, I am in fact Welsh, for people who probably won't know, I always root for England's demise, of course, and hope they lose every game, especially now that we'll be playing them again. However, I really feel like they have been held back by this loyalty under Southgate to play certain players that I think the vast majority of English fans really feel as if shouldn't be in the team. However, at least getting back to the actual squad, goalkeeper, I think for now, especially with Pickford's resurgence at club level, it'll be okay for him to start. And again, there's no surprises about those three options. But where there will likely be surprises is the defensive line. So we'll look at that now. Okay, so we have Trent. I think that would have been more of a discussion point if Reece James had been fit. I think there's a possibility that he wouldn't have been taken and he may have been left out. I mean, it's no... I can't think of the right word here, but there can be no doubt about Southgate's feelings towards Trent. He has chosen to not play him in many important games for England, even when he's been arguably the best right back in the world. And now that he's actually had a dip in form this season, as has most of the Liverpool squad, it wouldn't have surprised me at all if Reece James being fit, if Trent hadn't been taken. But he is the first name in the defenders list. It looks like this is alphabetical. So we've got Connor Cody. Okay. Eric Dyer, Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw, John Stones, Kieran Trippier, Kyle Walker and Ben White. Okay, so the first thing to note here is that we've got a lot of coverage at right back. as you'd expect with England, because that is probably their strongest position, and it's probably the strongest position, arguably, of any international team ever, to have that many right backs that are close, if not already, world class. So as we've already mentioned, Trent, a right back. We've got Kieran Trippier as well, who has been used as a left wing back previously by Southgate, and I think there may be the chance that this happens again. However, this does feel a defender light, and again, I don't want to look further down the page, but from what I can see, it looks like there's a lot of forwards that have been taken. Could this be an indication that Southgate is changing his ways, or is maybe considering at least playing a 4-back, which I think is probably the best idea for England. For a country with the level of talent that England has, to be playing 5 defenders really does feel like a waste of the talent, especially when you consider that we're taking, say we, not English, that they are taking Connor Cody, Eric Dyer, Maguire. These are all players in a very similar ilk. They play in a similar way. Do you need to be having 3 of them on the pitch at one time? Personally, I'm not a fan. I'm not sure about that. And I know a lot of England fans feel the same. They'd like to see more of their attacking talent on the pitch because it really is some of the best in the world. Now, something that's just dawned on me there as I took a refreshing sip of Dr. Pepper, not sponsored, of course, is that Fikayo Tomori is not on this list. I think that's quite shocking. I really do. And I know that the easy thing to do as English fans, especially because most English fans will only watch the English game, is to not really pay much attention to players who are playing abroad, because let's have it right, the Premier League is the strongest league in the world. It just is. It has all the money. You know, you see players go from challenging clubs in other leagues like France to mid-level teams in the Premier League, and there's no real batting of an eyelid at that anymore. I mean, just to name one, Estupinan last season went from, I believe, Villarreal to Brighton, who finished, I think, 13th, and Villarreal were competing, I think, for the Europa League last season, or they were close to a final of a competition. And that doesn't really even get noticed, but he was playing Champions League football last season. There's so many instances of that. So it is easy, as I'm saying, to ignore players who are English who go abroad because it happens so few and far between. And I think the mindset is just simply no other league is as good, so if they've gone abroad, that's going to be a downgrade. Whereas I just don't simply think that's the truth. Italian football, in particular, I would say is quite clearly the second highest level there is behind the Premier League. And for Fikayo Tomori to have left his home, you know, where I'm sure he felt very attached to, you know, in Chelsea, and to take that leap of faith to go over to Milan, learn the language, really commit to the way of playing as well, in order to try and make this World Cup team, I don't see what more he could have done. You know, he's gone over to Milan and won a Scudetto in a season where they weren't favourites. Not many people would have had Milan to win the title last season. And even by expected stats, more on the attacking end, they shouldn't have won. Inter should have beat them to it. But the reason why they were able to win the Scudetto was in no small part due to their immense defensive solidity, of which Fikayo Tomori was arguably the most important component. I mean, for anyone who watches the Italian league, Romagnoli was a mainstay of that Italian backline. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say Italian, Milan backline for the past 6 to 7 years. And he has had repeated injuries, and last season got hit hard by injuries. And Fikayo Tomori stepped in and built a partnership with Kalulu, who joined Milan from Lyon several years ago. He's only just hit roughly 22, I think. But he was a key component in them winning the league. It's seriously important. Without him, I don't think they would have done it. Almost certainly they wouldn't have done it. So they had the best defensive record in the league and won the Scudetto. And yet, 6 months on, we're looking at Connor Cody, and I'm not interested in the argument that the pundits seem to make of he's a good guy for the dressing room, and by all accounts is a nice bloke. You should be rewarding people on their ability on the pitch. That's the whole point of football. You know, you don't take players, especially you don't start players, because I won't say take players because Wales take players for that reason, but they're in replacement of people who have never had caps for the country before and aren't good enough to be playing anyway. Whereas in this instance, you shouldn't be taking and starting a player like Connor Cody, who, all right, he's had a decent season, he's been okay, but more often than not gets absolutely smacked on the arse at Everton. I mean, this isn't a good football club we're talking about. It's a really struggling football club. And you're unlikely to see many of those players getting picked for any countries. And somehow a player like Connor Cody going to a relegation struggling Everton is getting picked ahead of a Scudetto winning centre-back at Milan. I mean, call me crazy if I am, but that just seems completely backwards. And it's not like Southgate doesn't have the facilities to be able to watch Tomori week in and week out and see how well he's playing. I really feel like it's just not a good decision. And if you're making decisions on players who start purely for team morale, you're not going to get very far, because Connor Cody isn't a fantastic centre-back. He's okay, but he's not a player that's going to win you a league title. You know, if you replace Tomori with Cody in that team in Milan, they don't win the league, I can guarantee you that. So surely that should put Tomori ahead of these players. I don't know. And then especially when you see players like Harry Maguire too, the guy's not played a game in about 3 months. He's fourth choice at Manchester United. If people had their way at United, he probably wouldn't be at the club, and they maybe never would have bought him in the first place. I personally don't think he's a bad player, and I don't mind his inclusion. But if it's at the expense of a player like Fikayo Tomori, I really think decisions like that are criminal. And they're the type of decisions that will come back to haunt Southgate when he eventually gets fired for not delivering. Picking players out of form or who literally aren't playing. Another thing to mention with the defenders here is that I don't know if he's got an injury, but Ben Chilwell isn't on this list, which also would indicate to me that they are going to be likely using Trippier as the left back, because you only have Luke Shaw on this list. I don't mind that, but I think I wouldn't have minded seeing the inclusion of someone like Tyreek Mitchell. He's had a very good season for Crystal Palace. Orthodox left foot, guaranteed to be fit. I think, again, that is a fault of Southgate, is not blooding players like that in when he had the opportunity. I don't know if Mitchell's played a game. Off the top of my head, I think he has for England. But yeah, I'm not sure about that. Taking one left back, Luke Shaw's knees are made of glass, as is. I think you're already putting yourself on the back foot, because another thing I'm not a believer in is arguments that people are making about Ben White. Now, I would take Ben White anyway, but I've heard arguments of, well, if we need to, he can fill in at right back, or if we need to, he can fill in at defensive midfield. I think if you're getting to that point in a 26-man squad where one injury puts you in a position where you have to be playing a player out of position, even if they're a good player, you've made a mistake in your squad selection. It's as simple as that. I would rather have, just as an example like that, I would rather have Reece James, Trippier, right back. I'd rather have Tomori and let's just say Eric Dyer, for instance, at centre back. And I'd rather have Rice and then Phillips at CDM rather than take a player who can just maybe fill in if needed. You need to have that direct coverage of players who are used to playing there week in, week out. Otherwise, there's no point taking those players at all. Versatility, I think, is completely pointless in competitions like this, because if you are having to play in a World Cup a player out of position, you've made a mistake with your selection. It's as simple as that. That aside, I would have still selected Ben White. John Stones is in there, Maguire, Code. Okay, so they've got 5 centre-backs. I will just say I think Tomori and Guehi should both be in there. They have that link up from when they won, I think, the Under-17s World Cup together. I think they've both done enough, especially in Tomori's case, to be in this team. Personally, I think he's England's best centre-back. And looking at these lineups makes me feel a little bit better about playing England ourselves as a Wales fan, seeing that they won't have someone with the defensive ability and also the speed and the recovery speed of Fikayo Tomori. It makes me feel more confident of a player like Brennan Johnson and Dan James to be able to get into those half spaces and really stretch away from these centre-backs, because Connor Cody, Eric Dyer, even John Stones, Harry Maguire, these guys aren't fast. Again, England are going to be relying on Kyle Walker being in the right place at the right time if he's fit, because if they're playing a high line, they're going to get punished. There's not enough pace in that defence at all. But yeah, I mean, that's my opinion on the defenders. I'm not particularly impressed. I'm glad to see Trippier's in there. You know, I think he deserves to be in this England squad with the performance he's put in over the last year or so. And he's been fantastic for Newcastle, of course. But yeah, the big loss there is Tomori, and I'm a little bit surprised to only see one orthodox left back. However, let's move on to the midfielders. Quite a short list, 6 names. Okay, I had to go to the forwards there quickly just because there was a name that was strikingly obvious was missing off this list. Okay, that's interesting. So he has taken Calvin Phillips, who hasn't played, I don't think, a minute of football so far this season, or maybe he got a few for City at some point before he got injured. Declan Rice, Calvin Phillips, Henderson, Bellingham, Mount, and Gallagher. Gallagher makes the team. Almost a little bit surprised there, but then there's not a load of options, at least depth options, in centre midfield for England. Their starters are borderline world class, but past that, I mean, Jordan Henderson, I think, again, will be there for his leadership. I'd rather him be there for leadership than someone like Connor Cody. Conor Gallagher, I'm a little bit surprised to see Gallagher's name, because he's barely featured this season, or at least he's been used quite sparingly by the two managers at Chelsea. I don't feel as if he's done enough to be in this team, especially if you, again, I'll keep going back to, if you're leaving out a player of Tomori's caliber, how are we getting players in here that have played very limited minutes? I mean, Calvin Phillips, again, he's probably not even fit. Are you just taking him just in case? Oh, an obvious name that's missed out here is Ward-Prowse. I think he will be quite disappointed with that. I'm a little bit surprised not to see his name on that list. He has been used several times as well by Southgate. Again, this feels almost like a bit of a loyalty to, or sorry, maybe not a loyalty as such, but a bias towards top 6 teams in the Premier League here for Gallagher to have made that ahead of Ward-Prowse. I think that's a very difficult argument to say that he should be there instead. But, you know, Rice, Bellingham, Mount, that's what we're going to expect to see on the pitch. Everything else is likely to be rotation or a change of plan if needed in certain scenarios, whether England are winning or losing. And, you know, a player like Phillips may be fit by the knockout stages, at which time England are going to be facing harder opposition if they get there. And they may want to revert to having 2 deep-lying central midfielders rather than just the one in Declan Rice. So I don't hate that. I think overall in midfield, you can make good arguments for all of those players being there. There's nothing outrageous. And if we move on to the forwards, I'll start with the one player I was looking for, which was James Maddison. He is included. Surprisingly, didn't expect to see his name. I think it's good that his name is there. I think he deserves to be going. If we run through the rest of the names, you have Phil Foden, Jack Grealish, Harry Kane, James Maddison, Marcus Rashford, potential surprise inclusion, Bukayo Saka, of course, Raheem Sterling, and very surprisingly, Callum Wilson. Again, benefiting massively off the run of form that he's been able to put together at Newcastle, and I don't mind seeing that. I don't mind seeing a player like Callum Wilson being rewarded for his endeavour. You know, I don't think anyone would have anticipated that Callum Wilson would have been in this team come November, especially at the start of the season. because again, he's the type of player where his knees are made out of glass. Very similar to Luke Shaw in that respect. He just can't stay fit for long enough. But he has been able to for the start of this season. He's not had any injury issues at all other than being ill in the last couple of fixtures. One talking point I'd like to make around these options going forward. Again, as I said, I'm very happy to see James Maddison there. He's been rewarded for his fantastic form. I think he deserves to be there. He's got a very good head on his shoulders as well, from what we can see in interviews that he gives post-match. But one conversation piece here is Jack Grealish. Now, I know he has good moments for England, and he does generally play relatively well for England. However, he's not really been good since he's left Aston Villa. And that's quite a while ago now. Last season, he was pretty poor in the minutes that he did play for Man City. Again, remember, this is the best team in the world, arguably. And this season, he's not been much better. Jack Grealish is the easiest player to defend in the Premier League right now. He picks up the ball on the left wing, will dribble slightly with his right foot, just keep going forward, you keep backpedaling, and then at a point, he stops, turns around, passes it back. He does the same thing every time. I've not seen him take on a single player this season. I don't know if he's like... I don't understand how he's so favoured by Southgate. What has he done to put himself in this position? Especially from a manager that seems to really pride himself on taking players with the right mentality. You know, he's left out players in the past for what feels like that same reason of not being good enough to be part of the group, almost. And Jack Grealish has a very sketchy record in terms of his personality, who he is as a person. Now, I'm not faulting him for any of those things. I think footballers should be able to live their own lives outside of work. But I don't see what else it is that he's clinging on to for loyalty. It's not like we don't have any other players on this list that can play that position. Raheem Sterling, Phil Foden, even Marcus Rashford and James Maddison. I think these are all players that you could argue have played that same position on the left to a higher level than Jack Grealish has over the last year. So I'm not so much arguing his inclusion fully, but he wasn't a player that was at doubt in the same way that Rashford, Maddison, and Wilson, for example, were. His name was a mainstay alongside Harry Kane, Bukayo Saka, and I just don't think he should be. I don't think he's that caliber of player, or at least he hasn't shown it on a consistent enough basis within the last season and a half to be warranted. So I'm a little bit surprised that he gets in so easily. Again, omissions from this area of the pitch. I mean, there was a lot of conversations about the striking position in particular. I think the wings were more or less locked down with what I said there about Grealish in particular, really embodying that, in that he didn't really have any other challenges to his position. But I think Ivan Toney definitely deserves a shout. I think he's been fantastic this season, and we know England struggle with penalties in in competition football. And that's a guy with a 100% record there. Even if you just brought him on off the bench to take a penalty in a shootout, it could be invaluable. We may even look back at this moment and say, maybe they should have taken him. I think another player that is, again, very unfortunate not to be on the plane, for the exact same reason that Fikayo Tomori isn't, is Tammy Abraham. I think he had to be there, and I understand he's not playing to the same level this season. I think he's got like 3 goals, a couple of assists, which is nowhere near the kind of levels he was hitting last season, where he was, I think, above a goal every other game. But he's still playing week in, week out. Roma haven't been as fluid this season. He's got more competition in his position now with Belotti, in addition to Dybala, who has been in and out of the team. Zaniolo is also exceptionally selfish. Yeah, I think he's exceptionally unlucky not to have made it. Last season was incredible. He was so good. That's what really put him in the picture. And again, this is a player that was almost forced out by Chelsea, unlike Tomori, and has gone abroad, learnt the language, and has really excelled over in Italy. And yet we are still picking players who have had, a good month, when fit. I just think it's really disrespectful. I think Tammy had done enough at club level to deserve a place on this plane. And again, I don't mind rewarding the players in form because I think you do need that to a level. But Callum Wilson is the type of guy that could easily get injured the game before, or even just in training when they're out there. And I don't think he's a consistent enough performer, or he hasn't shown to be a consistent enough performer over the last 3 or 4 years to really be in the reckoning. He probably would have been 3rd or 4th choice behind other options to have made that last spot. So I am a little bit surprised by that. But again, even if Tammy would have gone or Ivan Toney would have gone, how many minutes are they really going to get? At the end of the day, they are competing with, I don't know if he is the captain, but, the first name on the team sheet, essentially, in Harry Kane. He's going to play every minute of every game, I suspect, unless England can get themselves in a position after 2 games in the group, for example, where they don't need to win the last game against Wales. Wouldn't mind that. Wouldn't mind that at all, actually. He may not play then, just to rest a few players into the knockout stages. Or if, of course, there's an injury. But again, Harry Kane, generally pretty good injury record. Don't expect him to go down before it or during it, really. In fact, he's probably one of the favourites for the Golden Boot again. So yeah, that's my feelings on the England squad. I think there are a few surprise inclusions. I think defensively, I don't think he's picked the right players there. I think they're one guy short at left back. They've picked a very immobile group of centre backs, some of which are either simply not good enough to be there or are not playing enough for their club to prove their spot or warrant their spot, I should say. And there are 1 or 2 attackers that maybe, again, shouldn't have been there. But on the whole, I think the team is roughly what you'd expect and really won't get that much abuse. I think the biggest omission definitely is Tomori. I think he had to be on the plane. I think he's England's best centre-back, as I said earlier. And he's fit and ready. It seems crazy. He's got experience in a 2, he's got experience in a 3. He's played at the very top level and continues to play at the very top level, where most of the players that have been picked simply don't. They don't play at the top level. In European football especially. So it's a real surprise to see a couple of those names. But again, as I say, I'm a Welsh fan, so seeing England potentially make mistakes is only a good thing for me. Now, just before we wrap up, I'm going to give a rough outline prediction of where I think they'll finish. I will say, and this might be my Welsh bias talking, but I can use facts to back it up as well. Statistically, our group, England's group, Wales's group, is the hardest group at this World Cup by FIFA World Rankings. All 4 teams are in, I think, the top 25 in the world, which is quite something. Very rare. In fact, you probably never have seen that before because of the way that the teams qualified. In particular, Wales as well, having to go through playoffs and beating Ukraine to get there, Austria and Ukraine. That teams that highly ranked would all end up in the same group together. And I do think if England play a 5-back in these games, they're going to struggle. Iran, I think, are a dark horse. I think they'll be a really tough team to beat. They've got a couple of attackers that play in the top echelons of European football, in Taremi and Azmoun, I think is correct, plays for Leverkusen, and Taremi plays for, I believe, Porto. These are guys playing at, as I said, the top echelons of European football. They're going to know where the goal is, and the biggest asset that Iran have is their defence. They have one of the strongest defences in the tournament, and now they're not household names, and I don't know them, but I know their record. And I remember seeing them in previous tournaments. They're exceptionally strong at the back. They're exceptionally hard to break down. It's no-nonsense football, and I think all teams in the group, Wales included, I think will really struggle against them. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if Iran cause a bit of an upset. I really wouldn't be surprised. On the flip side of that, I'm not so worried about the US. I think that will probably be everyone's easiest game. They have a lot of young, exciting players, but these are players that really play together. A lot of their best players play across Europe in all different leagues. They're very widespread. And like I said, they have good talent, but I don't see them being the cohesive unit that really is going to challenge England, Wales, or even Iran, to be honest. I really think that America will underwhelm this tournament. I think it will come 4 years too soon for many of their players who are still establishing themselves in their young 20s, or even as in their teenage years. Pardon me. So my prediction for the group is roughly like this. I think England, Wales, and Iran are going to be very close, closer than what people think. And everyone will look at this group and say, well, this is England's to lose. They'll walk this and beat every team 3-0. I don't think they will. I really don't think they will. And I wouldn't be surprised if they still have something to play for in the third game against Wales. As a Welshman, I hope they don't, and I hope they take their foot off the gas and we might be able to beat them. But something in my head tells me they're going to still be in the reckoning. And it's not going to be as simple as what it looks. I think that England will beat the US. I don't think that'll be too difficult for them. But in their first game against Iran, I could see an upset. I could. I think at the very least Iran would be good for a draw there. I could see that, and I wouldn't be surprised if Iran even beat us, potentially. But again, my bias in me will say a draw there. So yeah, my prediction is going to be that England finish second in their group. I have a feeling they'll be surprised. And I don't think their team is as strong as what many people believe. I think England have potentially had their best chance of winning the tournament come and go now. I think it might be time for a bit of a wake-up call and Southgate to lose his job. So I'm going to go for England to finish second in their group. I'm not going to say whether it's behind Wales or Iran, because it could go any different way. But I'm going to go England to finish second in the group, a bit surprisingly. And from what I've predicted previously, that would mean they would most likely face the Netherlands, who you'd think are almost certain to win their group because they have, in contrast, the easiest group with Qatar, Ecuador, and Senegal, I believe, who have just lost Mane for the tournament. So I think if England play the Netherlands, I think they'd probably lose that game. In all honesty, I don't think they'll beat them. They've got a good, strong core to that team. The players are very used to playing together. They've been the same players for a long, long time now. But also, they're not exactly old. They've got a lot of youth in there with players like De Ligt, who is so heavily capped, and De Jong. I think the Netherlands probably beat England. So my prediction is that England will go out in the round of 16. Controversial. Maybe. But that's my prediction. So yeah, that's it, guys. That's my review of the England squad. On the whole, give it about an 8 out of 10. It's a good team. There's a few glaring omissions. But I think no matter what, it doesn't matter who he'd pick, he'd still play the same players. So if Tomori had got picked, Eric Dyer and Cody probably still play. So, ahead of him anyway. So I don't think it makes a big difference in the grand scheme of things. It's a good team. We know what England will bring to the tournament. But I don't think they're going to have enough to win it. My prediction is they go out in around 16, quite shockingly, and sack Southgate the next day. But yeah, that's it. So I hope you enjoyed the video today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the new format that I went for today as a live reaction. It's a little bit different. I don't think I'll be doing a lot of them. You know, it's very rare that you get something quite like this come up with big team news. But we'll see. I'm going to be brainstorming a bit, thinking about some ideas that I can bring to the channel, a few content-wise that I enjoy, and also is something I can interact with my viewership for as well. I want you guys to enjoy the videos I'm putting out, because it almost feels pointless otherwise if I'm just talking to myself. So I'm going to put my head together now before the World Cup, have a think if there's anything else I could bring out. I do want to do some Wales specific content because I am Welsh. But as I said, yeah, I'll have a think about that. If you guys have any ideas for me, put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Also, give me a review of what you think the England team is. You know, do you think it's good? Do you think there are other omissions that I've potentially left out? Or do you think that there are players that I've said shouldn't be in there that you truly believe should be? I want to hear your opinions below. I'll be getting involved in the comments if there are any there. But yeah, that's it for the video, guys. The only thing I'll plug before the end is the football shirt behind me. You can't buy this one, but you can buy similar Inter Milan and primarily Wales shirts as well at my Depop, which is at mturnbull78. That is my Depop at mturnbull78. Go over there to get some authentic football shirts, and I usually send them within a couple days. Free delivery. They're just great price, cheaper than your classic football shirts and whatnot. Head over there, take a look, and that's it. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you again soon.